Have you ever wondered why you look like your parents? Or why some people have different eye colors? Today we're diving into the fascinating world of heredity. We'll explore how traits are passed from one generation to the next and how variations can make all the difference. Let's get started. First, let's define what heredity is. The transfer of characters or traits from the parents to their offsprings is called heredity. It means continuity of features from one generation to the next. This information is present in gametes or sex cells. Now, what about variations? The differences between the characters or traits among the individuals of the same species are called variations. For example, human height is a trait which shows variation. Another example of variation in human beings involves ears. The lowest part of the ear is called earlobe. In most of the people, the earlobe is hanging and it is called free earlobe. Most people have free earlobes closely connected to the head. Moving on, let's talk about the accumulation of variations during reproduction. The reproduction, offspring inherit minor variations due to DNA copying errors. These variations are smaller in asexual reproduction and larger in sexual reproduction. Some variations help organisms adapt to the environment, while others may not, potentially causing the organism to die or become extinct. The significance of a variation becomes clear when it is inherited over several generations. It helps species survive in a changing environment. For example, heat-resistant bacteria can survive higher temperatures and reproduce, passing on the trait. Bacteria without this trait die off, ensuring that beneficial traits are passed down, helping the species adapt. Now let's understand what genes are. This information is located inside each cell. Inside each cell, there are 23 pairs of chromosomes. Chromosome is a thread-like structure in the nucleus of a cell formed of DNA which carries the gene. A gene is a segment of DNA on a chromosome that controls the production of a protein, determining a specific trait. Genes are units of heredity, passing traits from parents to offspring during reproduction. Next, we have genotype and phenotype. Genotype is the description of genes present in an organism. Genotype is always a pair of letters such as TT, TT or TT, where T and T are the different forms of the same gene. Phenotype, the characteristic or trait which is visible in an organism, is called its phenotype. Let's talk about dominant and recessive traits now. The traits that express themselves in an organism in every possible combination and can be seen are called dominant traits. A trait which is not expressed in the presence of a dominant allele is known as recessive. Some examples of dominant genes include cleft chin, widow's peak, dimples, brown/black hair, freckles, brown eyes, and free earlobe. For recessive genes, we have no cleft, no widow's peak, no dimples, blonde hair, no freckles, grey/blue eyes, and attached earlobe. Next, we have the F1 and F2 generations. F1 generation or first filial generation is when two parents cross to produce progeny. Then their progeny is called the first filial generation. F2 generation or second filial generation is when the first generation progeny produce second progeny. In the parental generation P, 100% of plants have purple flowers. In the second generation F2, 75% of plants have purple flowers. Now let's discuss homozygous and heterozygous. Homozygous is a condition in which both the genes of the same type are present. For example, an organism has both the genes for tallness, it is expressed as TT, and genes for dwarfness are written as TT. Heterozygous is a condition in which both the genes are of different types. For example, an organism has genes TT, meaning it has a gene for tallness and the other for dwarfness. Only the tall character is expressed. Gregor Mendel was the first scientist to systematically study inheritance, examining how traits transfer from parents to progeny. Using pea plants, Paishum sativum, grown in his garden, he studied contrasting traits like seed shape, round or wrinkled, seed color, yellow or green, plant height, tall or dwarf, and flower color, white or violet. Now, let's touch on Mendel's law of inheritance. Characters are transferred through genes present in the DNA molecules in the chromosomes present in the nucleus of the cell. Inheritance occurs because both parents contribute equal genetic material to the child, providing one factor for each trait. Gregor Mendel conducted experiments with garden pea plants and determined the rules for the inheritance of traits. Mendel chose pea plants for studying inheritance because pea plants had a number of clear-cut differences which were easy to identify. Pea plants were self-pollinating, which enabled them to produce next generation early. Any generations of pea plants can be produced in a comparatively short time span, and their study is much simpler than that of animals. Mendel started his experiment on the pea plants. He conducted first monohybrid and then dihybrid crosses. Monohybrid cross, a cross where Mendel studied the inheritance of dominant and recessive traits, focusing on a single pair of contrasting characters. The law of segregation states that traits are determined by paired factors, with only one factor from each pair present in a gamete. In the monohybrid cross, the phenotypic ratio is 3:1, meaning there are 3 tall plants for every 1 dwarf plant. The genotypic ratio is 1:2:1, which means 1 pure tall, 2 hybrid tall, and 1 pure dwarf. Now, in the F2 generation of the monohybrid cross, height of pea plant, we see the results of crossing TT tall and TT dwarf. Here is another example shown for monohybrid cross between round and wrinkled flowers. Mendel also carried out experiments to observe inheritance of 2 pairs of contrasting characters in what is called a dihybrid cross. He crossbred pea plants with round green seeds and wrinkled yellow seeds. The F1 generation showed all round yellow seeds, indicating round and yellow are dominant traits. He then self-pollinated the F1 plants to produce the F2 generation. Mendel obtained 4 different types of seeds: round yellow, round green, wrinkled yellow, and wrinkled green in the ratio of 9:3:3:1. He concluded that traits are independently inherited. We can see the results of the dihybrid cross as shown here. Now, let's understand what probability charts are. These are diagrams designed and used to determine the probability that a product will have a certain genotype. They allow for the observation of all possible combinations. Dominant alleles are represented with uppercase letters and recessive alleles with lowercase letters. Mendel studied two traits in pea plants: seed shape, round or wrinkled, seed color, yellow or green. He crossed two pure breeding plants, one with round, yellow seeds and the other with wrinkled green seeds. In the F1 generation, all plants had round, yellow seeds, as round and yellow are dominant traits. When F1 plants self-pollinated, the F2 generation showed four types of pea plants in a 9:3:3:2:3:1 ratio. Finally, let's look at sex determination in human beings. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, including two sex chromosomes, X and Y. Females have XX, while males have XY. Sperm and eggs each carry one sex chromosome. Sperms can be X or Y, and eggs are always X. If a sperm with an X chromosome fertilizes an egg, the child will be a girl. If a sperm with the Y chromosome fertilizes the egg X, the child will be a boy. We also distinguish between acquired and inherited traits. Acquired traits are traits of an organism which is not inherited but develops in response to the environment. It cannot be passed on to their future generations. In contrast, an inherited trait is caused by a change in its genes and can be passed on to future generations. Finally, let's talk about variations and their impact on survival. Some variations help organisms to survive. For example, beetles living in green bushes reproduce, increasing their numbers. Red beetles are easily spotted and eaten by crows, causing their population to decrease over time. On the other hand, green beetles blend with the bushes, survive better, and increase in numbers. However, not all variations help organisms survive. For instance, during sexual reproduction, a color variation occurs in red beetles, producing some blue beetles that are also visible to crows. Thus, the population of both red and blue beetles decreases. Moreover, acquired traits cannot be passed from one generation to the next. Acquired traits are changes in an organism that occur due to environmental factors, not genetics. For example, if beetles face a food shortage, their body weight decreases. But when food availability improves, their body weight increases again. These changes in body weight are acquired traits resulting from environmental conditions. Acquired traits are not inherited as they do not involve changes in the genetic composition of organisms. In summary, heredity is all about how traits are passed from parents to offspring, while variations can significantly affect survival. Understanding genes, genotypes, and phenotypes helps us grasp how these traits work. We hope that you have understood the topic. You can now study chapter notes, watch video lectures, and solve MCQ tests of this chapter on EduRev to ensure you score well in your school exams. And that's not all. You also get amazing courses for maths, science, English, Hindi, and much more for class 10. Thank you